Hello and welcome to the Haiku Pea Podcast with me, Patricia Maguire. Today I have some great haiku and senryu for you, a little chat with Stanford M Forrester, and a favour to ask of you. But first, a few reminders. I'm very happy to tell you that the Autumn Journal is now available for download. Head over to the website to get the link. It really is a cracking journal and lots of work went into preparing it by so many people. I really hope you enjoy it. Now, I've had a lot of emails about topics, and I just wanted to remind you they start again in February. There will be some new emails for submissions. I get so many submissions these days that I need some different emails to just divide them all up. And then there are some new submission deadlines. So do sign up for the mailing, because I'll remind you about everything through that. Of course, the information will also be on the website, and if you click on the submission pages, you should get it all there. In January, there'll be a workshop on colour in haiku, and a heads up for you, that's going to be our first topic of 2022. Now, did you know that we nominate poems from the Poetry Pea Journal for the Touchstone Awards, the Pushcart Prize and Red Moon Anthology? And if I'm missing an opportunity to nominate your work for awards or anthologies, do let me know. So anyway, at the end of the calendar year, I put together my top 40 faves from the journal. I do try and be objective. I have guidelines for submissions for the journal, and so I keep to those when I'm choosing my favourites. But I also look at the craft the poet demonstrates in the individual poems, and of course, they do need to resonate with me, so there's a little bit of subjectivity there too. Over the next few podcasts, I'm going to let you know my favourites for 2021. If you disagree with me, have I missed a poem that you really felt should be on my list? Do email me and tell me. I'm going to start, quite naturally, with our first journal this year, Spring 2021. Cherry Blossoms. I only need to write 2 lines. Valentina Rinaldi Adams. Digging the garden, the robin and my coat sitting on the spade. James Young. Each day follows the next duckling. Brad Bennett. Almost poetic, I wandered lonely on a lockdown high street. Tracy Davidson. Afternoon snow. The hen doesn't notice the sky is falling. Kristen Lindquist. Summer orchard. A pear drips from her paintbrush. Isabel Caves. 1,000 birds outside a song stuck in my head. Craig Kittner. Willy War. Gales from another planet rush through me. Doris Lynch. A night breeze bends the blossomed branch. Newlyweds. Robert Whitmer. Floating voices. Geese ride a current to still water. Craig Kittner. Map lichen. The time it takes a river to carve a valley. Kristen Lindquist. Now, as many of you will know, I've been saving for a new microphone, and I'm happy to say that thanks to you, I will be buying it. I like a specific brand of microphone, and whilst I've been saving up, they've brought out a new version. And it's not available here in Switzerland yet, so I'm going to wait until I can get it, hopefully in the new year. Thank you so much to everyone who helped me get there. And now I'm planning for next year and into the future. I do have a few ideas for complimentary podcasts, specialist series, and so on. And so I need to expand the technology available to me, upgrading the website, for example. Because it started as a hobby blog, and thanks to you, Haiku and Senryu have become more than a hobby. And I need to do something to make the website more functional for you to use, to let you find all the resources we have so much more easily. That's what I'm saving for now, improving the service I can give to you. If you can help, do go and buy the podcast a coffee, because every little bit helps. And so let me thank our coffee supporters for November. It's thanks to you that I finally financed my new mic. Let's have a round of applause for Carl Setzer, Bona M. Santos, Tony Williams, Isabel Maury, Linda Ludwig, Alison Douglas Turner, Mimi Ahern, Bruce Feingold, David Oates, M. Shane Pruitt, Krista Pandy, Lorraine Padden, Joanna Ashwell, Loretta Potts, Laughing Waters, Marilyn Ward, Sherry Grant, Craig Kittner, Mariangela Kanzi, Alison Whipple, Jason Furtak, Daniel Birnbaum, Brett Brady, Peter Jastrzemski, Carol Judkin, Pat Gear, C.X. Turner, Kurt Paulish, Barry Levine, Richard Matter, and Barbara Carlson. And thank you to all of you who are supporting the work I do here at Poetry Pea and have bought the latest journal. It's been out a couple of weeks now, and I let everyone on the mailing list know about it first. So, if you want to get the latest news, do sign up for the mailing. And if you'd like to buy the latest journal, head over to the website and click on the link on the journal page. It will take you to where you can buy it. Only if you want to, of course. Thank you once again. As you know, there's a monthly prompt from Poetry Pea on our YouTube channel. This month, the prompt came from Richard Bailey. Thanks, Richard. If you have a little video around 20 seconds long, taken in landscape mode, that's quite important, that you think would be a great prompt, do send it to me. The idea behind it is to leave your poem in the comments and to give some love and support to other poets who've done the same. Linda L. Ludwig is reading all your poems and choosing a selection to be featured on the podcast. But today, I've chosen the poems from August and September of this year. Don't worry, Linda's choices will be on the podcast in January. So today, I'd like to read you these poems. From August, Joy as an Act of Resistance. Summer Night. Deborah A. Bennett. Sunlight on the kaleidoscope of butterflies. Martin. And in September, Wild Geese, a whistling locomotive going south. Anna Maria Domberg San Cristoforo. Falling dusk, a lone bird, its own feathers. Radhamani Sama. And now I have a little prezi for you. A snippet from a chat I had with Stanford M Forrester, the illustrious editor of Bottle Rockets. To put the chat into a little bit of context, Stanford and I were having a chat about next year's offerings. Let's just say it's Kerouac's centenary, and leave it at that for the moment. Now remember, back in episode 17 of this series, Mark Gilbert and I briefly spoke about Richard Wright. We were speculating as to whether he would have changed anything in the haiku he wrote for his book, Richard Wright, Haiku, This Other World. Well, as Stanford and I were chatting, he said...
So it's interesting because when we had talked about Richard Wright, I went back into my haiku library and I realized that I have an older copy. This, I believe, was the first paperback. This book came out, I believe, in 1998. I was working at Yale University Press at the time this book came out. The editors are Yoshinobu Hakutani and Robert L. Tenner. So they mentioned in their editor's note where the manuscript was. And I actually hadn't bought the book yet. So, I mean, I had seen the book, I had eyed the book, but my expense account for buying books was out of control. Not that it stopped me, but I remember reading about this in the editor's notes saying it's at the Beinecke Rare Book Library. I just walked over and they said, yes, you just need to fill out this form and whatever. So they hand me basically almost like a menu of their manuscripts for Richard Wright. And there was 74 feet of shelf space for Richard Wright that Yale has. And out of that 74 feet, and I don't remember how many boxes it was, there were two boxes of his haiku. The contents were listed. So I went through both boxes, and one was, it was like a folder with typed paper, and then I can't remember, the other one was, they were both in notebooks, and I believe one was maybe written in pencil. But the interesting thing is, when you talk about Richard Wright too, is that Blythe was a very heavy influence on him. And I just noticed this morning. I'm looking at this book on Richard Wright, and then I'm looking back at the 4 volumes of R.H. Blythe, and the typography is very similar. And what I noticed is in Blythe's 4 volumes, all his haiku, they have, this was at the time, this was the convention at the time, every sentence starts out with a capital letter.
Yep.
Uppercase, all 3 of them. And now, a lot of times we don't even do that sometimes for proper nouns. And he ends, I believe, pretty much everything with a period. And that's exactly how Blythe, and then the other interesting typographical thing is that if you look on all 4 volumes, a lot of the Blythe poems, the first line is indented and the third line is indented, leaving the left line really being the second line being the only one justified left. And Blythe does that all the time. And I remember when I was kind of getting into things back in the 90s, late 80s, what I'm saying, that was the same thing. A lot of people were doing that. Richard Wright really kind of, unfortunately, I believe, focused on the 575.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because here he's reading 4 volumes of Blythe that are not 575, and his poems end up being in 575. He has the way of looking at things like Blythe. And the thing is, he only wrote haiku for 18 months. My theory is that he was still in the process. He was definitely a work in progress, and he knew that. And to me, if I looked at these poems, or I do as an editor, I say they're pretty damn good poems, but they could really, it wouldn't have hurt to collaborated with somebody that was a more haiku person. An interesting thing too is, like, I think you had mentioned in our conversation, like Ben Ga had said out of like 100 good poems, you might get 1 good poem. I'm the same way, I'm like, like my first book, I think I did it was 30 poems out of like 6,000 or 7,000 poems. So what's interesting to me, what they say about Wright is they picked, 680 something poems?
I think it's more. 817 out of 4,000.
out of 4,000. So
Yeah.
that's, Ben and I are talking 1 out of 100. Richard Wright's talking 1 poem out of 4 that are ending up in a book. That's a very high ratio. Basho didn't have that ratio.
No, he didn't.
None of those guys had that ratio, 1 out of 4. So the interesting thing too, and I can't remember one of the notebooks, but the other notebook which fascinated me was that they were typed on onion skin paper. So they were going down the page on onion skin paper. And that's the typewriter paper we used to use, when typewriters were fading out, that paper kind of like disappeared. But so that's what his poems were on. Now you're thinking, remember, this is pre-computer. So what happens if he revises a poem? Me being OCD, I would have probably retyped all 5 poems or all 10 poems. What he did was he retyped the poem and cut out the poem almost like it was like a fortune cookie.
Yeah.
Like just a strip. So he then taped the revised poem and taped it over
the original. Okay.
The original one. So here's the interesting thing. So it was completely taped over 4 sides. Yale peeled off the right side of if you're looking down, the right side of each, haiku that was taped on top, so you can lift it up and see what the original haiku was.
Wow.
And as you know, sometimes the original one's better than the revised. And then sometimes it isn't. Like, how many times have you written a poem? You've done like 15 versions of the poem, and then you say, you know what? The first one was probably the better one.
Best, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's, there's no, sometimes it's the opposite. Yeah, the 15 times worked, but not always. So it was very interesting to me because I was looking through them through an editor's view, and they were like, I was knocked out by a lot of the ideas. And he was an existentialist. He was friends with Simone Beauvoir, him and his wife. He knew Camus and he knew Sartre. Mm-hmm. So his haiku actually has that in there too. And then I can't remember if it was in the book that was edited, introduction by his daughter, Julia Wright, the one we just talked about, the first one, is that they said, well, he maybe didn't know the rules. And I saw in his own handwriting, in pencil, he was writing on the side, simile, personification. So he knew when he was breaking the rules. And I have the gut feeling that he was like, he was in a writing process. So it's like, okay, these are the things. And do I say, okay, I'm going to break the rules knowing it's that because I want to try to expand, or let me worry about it later? Because to me, this is the pointer saying these books is like, no, he wasn't there yet, but he was getting there, and it's such a tragedy. And his poems do have something to offer, even though he wasn't there yet. But the tragedy is that we hadn't seen his poems on a more developed stage. Yeah,
I think that's quite important to say. If you read all 800, which I know you have and I have, you can pick out ones that are there, that are definitely there.
You don't read 4 volumes of R.H. Blythe and still write 575. So that convention was very, very strong. And there's another book, I think, called Black Poets of the 20th Century by Dudley Randall. There were other African Americans writing haiku. The language that is used with these Black poets is so rich. It's like saturated. It's wonderful. And you see that, you also see that in Wright stuff, but it's like a bonsai tree. Just one little clip here, a little clip there, and boom, you're there. That's the tragedy. I would suggest that there would be another book out publishing all the different versions, like what they did, Regina Weinreich did with Kerouac's haiku. There's 3 or 4 different versions of the haiku within the different notebooks through the different chapters. So you could see how the poem evolved. So that would, for scholars, that's the key.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. You want to have an editor, a poetry editor, edit a poetry book. If you want to play cricket, you don't have a rugby editor. You have a person who, or if writing about baseball, don't have a person who writes football, right? Find a baseball editor. You could pull out, you're doing a better service to the, acquisitions. And, and again, the thing is, this is posthumous. So, he didn't have a say in the end. Maybe he would have changed some of the poem.
Basically, what you're saying is that Richard Wright is not the only Black American who was writing haiku. Maybe our next challenge is to find a Black poet who wants to explore this. I thought that would be a nice way to round up our thoughts on Richard Wright, although there might be quite a lot more to be said, so watch this space. Thanks, Stanford. We'll see you back here in March for a little bit of Kerouac.
My pleasure. Thank you, Patricia.
So Stanford will be back with us at least once next year, and he'll be letting me know about a haiku contest all around Kerouac and the centenary. And when I get those details, I'll send them to you in a mailing. Yes, another reason to go and get yourself signed up for the mailing on the website. And the favour I was going to ask of you? Well, as you know, I don't have a presence on Facebook. So, could you let people know that Poetry Pea exists and that we'll be open for submissions again in February? I'd be really grateful, thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Do come back early in the new year for a workshop on colours and to hear more of my favourite haiku and senryu from this year, as well as Linda's picks from the PTV haiku prompt. Don't forget, if you haven't written your poems in the comments section on the YouTube channel, then Linda can't read them and they can't qualify for inclusion. So do head over to the Poetry Pea channel and write some poetry. Till next time, keep writing. And do let me know if there's something missing from the show notes, and I'll sort it out for you. Ciao!